There I was at a Denver Nuggets game and the whole stadium was spinning. My palms were sweating, my thoughts were racing, and I was overcome by this sense of terror and overwhelm, feeling like I might need to call 911 or I was going to be carried out on a stretcher. This was my reality just 2 years ago. Since then, I've been able to make a full recovery and am no longer afraid of experiencing these states. In this video, I'll share my story with dizziness and panic attacks, along with the one tool that really helped me overcome them. Additionally, I'll be providing an explanation of what panic attacks are so you can better understand what's happening when they're occurring. I'll start with a little background on my experiences with dizziness and panic so maybe you can relate. For me, I was experiencing a whole host of symptoms, but one of the main ones was dizziness. This was going on for 6 months or so, and I was not able to find any resolution. The thing was, it only really happened when I was walking, standing up, or working out. When it turned into what I would now describe as a panic attack is when it started happening when I was sitting down. It also started happening every day for about a full week. I'd be sitting down and all of a sudden I'd feel extremely lightheaded and flooded with anxious thoughts. I'd think that I was going to pass out or that something was severely wrong. I began trying to solve what was happening and start to catastrophize about what this state might mean for the rest of my life. Only after a little bit of research, I started to realize that this was a panic attack. In this state is not usually when I find my best solutions to life's challenges. However, at this moment, I actually came across some really useful information. I remembered that I had recently overcome back pain with this thing called somatic tracking, and I had come across a podcast with someone saying that they had used somatic tracking to be able to overcome their panic and dizziness. I arrived at my next improv class expecting to experience the symptoms and not being afraid of them. In this class, about 10 minutes in, as suspected, I began to experience that lightheaded feeling. This precipitated into anxious thoughts and wobbly legs and even some tight breathing. This time I was aware of it and I started to use somatic tracking to shift my experience. That being said, it's important to take the disposition that we are welcoming our experience as it is, not trying to change it. So when I noticed thoughts telling me I might need to pass out, that something is wrong, starting to evaluate what were the causes and triggers of the feelings and thoughts, I began to direct my awareness onto the body. I asked myself the questions: where do I feel that? What's that like? Do I feel any other sensations in my body, and is it changing? What I started to notice is that the feelings would go up and come down and go up. I noticed that they weren't going on this exponential curve up and up and up into infinity or incapacitation or death, which is usually a fear in that really panicked state. And through this noticing, my body started to settle down slowly but surely. And by the end of the class, I was fully present in my body and feeling excited to engage with my other classmates. Now, earlier I mentioned that I also experienced dizziness when I would walk, and I wasn't able to find resolution to this before. So I thought I could use the same thing for when I walk and experience dizziness. I have since integrated somatic tracking into my walks and have been able to fully resolve my dizziness. Additionally, I also use it sometimes when I'm feeling impulsive to be able to sit with uncomfortable sensations. Now, let's talk a little bit about what panic attacks are so we can better understand what's happening when we're experiencing them. In my experience, what panic attacks are, there is a host of sensations, oftentimes emotions or just sensory experience that feel deeply unsafe. And what we do in response to this is brace against it and go into our heads because it's so uncomfortable. What then manifests is this fast breathing and feeling of overwhelm, where it turns from regular fear into a full-blown panic attack is in the realm of the thoughts. These thoughts fluster our system even more, which adds even more of those stress hormones, adrenaline and cortisol. We feel an increase in those hormones, which also dysregulates our blood pressure, contributing to that lightheaded feeling. With that background on how panic attacks work, I'll jump into the tool. Before I go into the tool, it's important to note that this is not medical advice. Before integrating any of the stuff that I'm sharing, please go to a medical provider and make sure to rule out any medical reasons for what you're experiencing. Somatic tracking is turning our attention onto our body sensations with a sense of playfulness and curiosity. So in practice, what this means is when our mind is racing with stories about the future and what this might mean and what might happen, instead of trying to figure that out and plan for the worst case scenario, what we're doing is actually turning our attention onto our body sensations. We ask ourselves questions like, what's that like? Where do I feel that? Is this changing? Do I feel any pressure? Do I feel any other sensations? The reason that somatic tracking completes the cycle of the panic attack is because it reroutes our physiology. If we're constantly having the thought that we're going to pass out or that something is wrong, we begin to believe it, our body starts to react as if there is a threat. So what we are doing with somatic tracking is sending cues of safety to the body. So what we can do is actually turn towards our experience, and not the thoughts and the stories, but actually the felt experience of the present moment. What we learn when we consistently pay attention to the sensations with that attitude of curiosity and listening, we start to notice that we're really just experiencing sensations. There are stories happening in our mind, but those aren't really based in reality. When our body understands that there's not a threat, it begins to relax and starts to integrate our sensational experience. So I can talk about the somatic tracking tool, but if you never actually try it, you'll never know the effects or what it will feel like. So that's why I made a video that you can check out if you want to try the somatic tracking practice yourself. I want to caveat that somatic tracking isn't this kind of one-shot bullet. You can feel it once and it's over. It's now been 2 years since I experienced that week of full-blown panic attacks, and I still experience anxiety in my life. I know that it's a series of chemicals and unintegrated feelings that I haven't quite felt yet. So I know I can come to my experience with an attitude of playful curiosity, and that doesn't mean that it's not incredibly uncomfortable in the moment. However, there is a bit of spaciousness around it because I'm not as afraid of the thoughts as I used to be. If you enjoy this video, I will continue to be making content, educating on the nervous system and speaking with experts. If any of what I shared resonates, go ahead and subscribe and follow along for more videos.